So what this video is about is how to maintain your brush hog. I have two brush hogs and I beat the ever-loving tar out of them. So what I usually do is I put one on, take the other one, maintain it, and at the end of the year I switch them out and maintain the other one. Now what I'm going to do is start out by sharpening the blade because they're going to be toast. I run over trees that big, usually it's sumac. But yeah, they get used pretty hard. So we're going to start by sharpening the blades. Then we'll go into welding anything that needs to be welded or straightened. I know this is a welding channel. You're thinking, well, welding would be done on a brush hog, but I promise you, every time I maintain a brush hog, there's some kind of welding that needs to be done on it. So then we got to lube up the gearbox, and then we'll go into greasing all the grease fittings, usually in the U-joints in the PTO shaft, and then there's usually one on the back wheel too. So do all the greasing last. So what we'll start with is getting these blades off. So we'll get an impact and get going on this. So when taking the blades out, the first thing you need to do is find a hole in the top of the brush hog, and then you can see the nut on the top of the blade. You obviously have to spin the blade around to get the nut to line up with the hole, and then you got to get a socket for it, which just happens to be an 1 3/4 socket for this one. And my impact is too small to fit it, so I'm going to try and take it off by hand, and we'll see how that goes. I've had them off before, so it probably won't be too bad. We'll see what happens. Alright, so on my way in, I was thinking, you need to have a forklift to do this. I don't remember why, and now I remember why. That, I thought, was like a carriage bolt, so it's square, so it wouldn't spin. It's not, it's round, so it spins. So basically what you got to do is get underneath this thing, take that nut off, which will take that whole plate off, and then you got to get those I guess you call them a pin, I guess, into a vise. So what we're doing now is we're going to pull that pin out of the middle of the nut there, take the nut off. We'll try it without heat first. If we need heat, we'll go to heat, and I'll take that whole plate off. There we go. Alright, so we got the pin out of the middle of the nut. I wedged that bar in the U-joint right there on the top to keep it from spinning. So now we'll try to unscrew the nut, and that'll bind it up so that it doesn't just spin on the top, because otherwise it's just going to spin the PTO shaft. Whew, alright, we got that off. That was kind of heavy, but so now what we're going to do is get this pin into a vise, and then we'll try and turn the big nut on the other side and get these babies off. Well, the lighting is terrible, so I couldn't get underneath it, but you can kind of see it a little bit, hopefully. It's in the vise. We got to get the nut off now. Let's do it to it. Alright, I went right to the heat gun here, the old torches. That bolt is removed. So we'll get on to the next one now. I got to get that one clamped in. And we'll get the next one out here. That's a process that was Rinky approved. Rinky's my buddy that works on tractors, just so you know. So that's Rinky approved. Alright, once again we have a Rinky approved removal, and now it's time to sharpen. I'm going to go get my big old Metabo out. We're going to sharpen these babies up. We'll take a look at how dull they are beforehand, though. They're not as bad as I thought for how much I abused the brush hog. So here's the blades. Yeah, they're banged up, but I don't know, I thought they were going to be worse than that. That's the top. I'll flip them over. Here's the bottom. I mean, they're necked up and they're pretty round, but But what I do with this thing, I thought they'd be in way worse shape than that. So just grind them up to a point and we'll put it back on. So we just got done sharpening those blades. They're so shiny, they're blinding the camera. So we got some nice sharp scissors, ready to cut. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is that before you put this thing back together, if you used heat, it's gonna kind of mess up your lock washers, and you're gonna want to spread them babies back out, so that when you put that back together, it actually has pressure on it. So you're gonna have to make them spread out again before you put them back on. You don't want that nut falling off, then you got a knife flying through the air. So make sure you make them good lock washers again, all right? Alright, so we got both nuts back on. They're installed. One thing I forgot to say is make sure you got your cutting edge going the right way, right? So you got to kind of line this up with, actually what I did was I looked where you could see the wear marks on it where the actual pin went through, so I just lined them up. But you got to make sure that you got the cutting edge going the way it spins. So you can either mark it or do what I did, just kind of match up with where the wear marks are. So let's mount this baby back up. Sorry, I'm out of breath. So I got both blades back on, and then I noticed, remember when I said I guarantee you'll have to weld something? Can you see the top edge of that weld without it getting blurry? It's totally broke off. So that weld is doing absolutely nothing. There's 4 of them on that plate, so basically 25% of your strength is now gone. So we're going to grind that out, fix it, and then we'll mount this thing back up. Alright, so I just ground the weld out, and what I'll do now is hit it with the wire wheel real quick just to make sure there's no more junk in that crack, and then we'll weld her up. So as expected, the first pass I did got a little bit of contamination in it because, you know, we're dealing with a brush hog here. And so what I did is I did a multi-pass, put one on the bottom and then put one on the top. That way it's not coming off. So we're going to mount this baby up and continue on. Okay, so we just got this baby put back on, and you can see I highly suggest you do it with someone else. I did it by myself and my shoulders are on fire. It's pretty heavy, so if you can get somebody to help you, it would be beneficial, and you want to hold it up with your head like I did. But anyways, so we've got the nut on, and then you got this pin that goes through, spread it out, you gotta line up the hole. You want to tighten it up and then bring it back to the hole so it's got a little bit of looseness to it. And this thing should be good to go. So I'm gonna lower it down and we're gonna start on the welding part of this. So I got 3 spots that need to be welded. We're gonna start with the most minor, and you can see there's a crack right there. I'll just wire wheel that, get it ready to rock. That'll take no time at all. This spot here isn't actually broke, it's just kind of stretched. You can see grass starting to come through there. So I'll weld that. That's the next one. And again, I'll clean all this up and show you it till you cleaned up right before I weld it. I'll go to the third. This is the worst out of the 3, and you can see it's kind of peeling up. If you look at the main part, it's bent. Yeah, the lighting's terrible here, but this is the worst spot. You can see anytime you're working on anything that mows grass, you got to get the grass off or it's going to catch on fire. So I'm going to take this outside, clean it up. I'll probably weld the 2 minor ones first, and then we'll get this fit up. This is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. Anytime I put any patches over, I always use stainless. I always never understood why you put carbon steel down on something like this, because it's just going to rot eventually. So in the front, I'm probably just going to put a piece of stainless that goes from here over to here, straighten it out somewhat. I'm not too worried about if it's bent, because it's bent for a reason. It's probably going to bend again, but we'll get started here on the cleanup. I'll show you the cleanups and then we'll move on. So here's a look at that minor crack, and you can see some more stuff opened up. A lot of times when you're dealing with rotten stuff, you start cleaning it up and you open up a can of worms. So I'm going to fix that right now, and the next one I'm going to show you here in a second. Here's the other side. And again, you see some holes opened up, and what I'm going to do is smash that down with a hammer real quick and tack it, and we'll go from there. All right, repair number 1, I ended up having to put a plate over it. It was just too thin. But it's done, and there's no longer a hole there. Let's go to repair number 2. Repair number 2 went much better. I beat it down a little bit. Patched the holes. She's good to go. Now this was the bad part, if you remember when we first looked at it. And I cleaned it up, grass-wise anyways. And now I'm going to beat it all smooth. Cut a piece of stainless that goes right across the front of it, and then try and blend this together. Not going to do too much straightening. I just think it's a lost cause, and it's just going to end up bending again, but we're going to reinforce it anyways. So I'll hammer it down, cut the plate, and then we'll take another look at it. Alright, so I beat all of that down as flat as I could, and then I cut this piece of stainless to go over the top of it all. And the idea here is I'm going to clamp it as I go and just try and move that in a little bit, maybe straighten it out just a touch, and just get everything blended together so that's all one solid piece again. So what we're going to do now is like I said, clamp and hammer a little bit and tack this baby back in. It's going to be a minute, but we'll get it done here. Alright, so what I've been doing here is weld a little bit, hammer it down, weld a little bit, hammer it down, and as you're doing this, it's pulling the metal back into shape. It won't be perfect without clamping it and heating it, but it'll get it back into shape, you know, kind of decently, I guess. And I just ran out of gas, right? I don't know if you can see it. Down in there, there's a hole. So I'm going to switch the shielding gas out. We're a little bit more than halfway done. And the top part will be a little bit harder, it's a little bit thinner, but let's change the shielding gas and we'll get right back into it. So I just got done welding that piece of stainless in. It's a little bit bent up, but it's all together now. It's structural. I don't feel like a blade's gonna kill me if it flies off. So what we'll do now is we'll hit the grease fittings. I'm gonna check the gear oil. Actually, I might just get some on the ride home and do that at my house. So what we'll do is we'll do the grease fittings now. I'll load up in the trailer and then I'll get gear oil on the ride home. We'll do that when we get home. Alright, so we just got done doing the grease fittings. Last thing we gotta do is the gear oil box here. So we're just gonna top this thing off. And then we will wrap this project up. Ooh. Looks kind of dirty, but... So that wraps up our brush hog maintenance video. I know in the beginning it may not seem like it's a welding project, but it ends up being a welding project every single time. At least there's some welding that ends up happening. So we're going to get the heck out of here. Thanks for watching and subscribing to TV Weld, and we'll see you next time.